Hey there, everyone. It's Jody Sutter of the Sutter Company, and welcome to this month's installment of Just Ask Jody Live. This is my monthly event on LinkedIn where I bring in a guest who has a specific point of view around agency business development, specifically agency business development for smaller agencies under 25 people. And we're going to chat for about half an hour. If you are joining live, I encourage you to participate. Please ask questions in the chat. I will be monitoring it. I also have my team member, Megan, in the background here. She'll be monitoring comments. So she'll also make sure that we see any questions that I might miss. But please do participate. And if you're watching the recording, hey, thank you for watching. All right, so today I have an old friend joining me, but someone with a lot to contribute around how an agency might position itself and the importance of a strong niche positioning for successful business development and successful agency growth. So it is my friend Amy Anderson, who is the founder and owner of Wild Coffee Marketing. And sorry, I'm just diverting my eyes because I have a little bit of a cheat sheet on her bio. So first of all, Amy and I met longer than we'd like to admit many years ago in the wild, wild west days of the internet, where we both were working for an internet media startup. It was a fun, crazy time. And of course, really bonded with a lot of the people that we were working with at the time. She's gone on to work with clients like the New York Times Media Company, New York Times Digital, Calvin Klein. So lots of client side expertise as well as agency side expertise. And she started her firm, Wild Coffee Marketing, to work with companies in rapid growth mode. So these would include companies in the franchise space, multi-location marketing, and B2B. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. As I said, she and I reconnected. I don't know. Come on out, Amy. Here you go. I guess we reconnected a couple of months ago through our very good friend. Shout out to Robert Levitan. And it'd been a long time since we had seen each other. But one of the things that I loved in our conversation was you started telling me about Wild Coffee Marketing. And first of all, a couple of things. One, I hope this is okay to say, but you were in some ways a bit of an accidental agency owner. And
Absolutely.
maybe despite that or because of that, you figured out your niche and you've kind of stuck with it. It's evolved. Your agency is growing. And I just thought you would have so many things to share with the audience. So first of all, hey, nice to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks so much for having me on, Jody.
Oh, you're welcome. It's so nice to have you here. So Wild Coffee Marketing, remind us, how long have you been running that?
It's been 7 years. And, I don't even think I knew what I was starting when I started it. You mentioned I was a client side marketer. That was the case when you and I met all those years ago. And when I wanted to start consulting and I wanted to build something, not knowing what it was, I really wanted to take my client side experience and translate it into a marketing consulting model, not really knowing what it was at the time.
Yeah. So what was it about? What did you see on the client side that made you say, wow, this is really missing in agency models? This is what clients need that they aren't getting from the current agency model.
Well, through and through, it's the strategy piece. A lot of agencies report, to a CMO, to marketing folks, and we are actually replacing that marketing position in the middle market, right? So these are not larger sort of national brands, although some of them are in the franchise space. It's middle market where maybe they have a hero, one person team, or they may have a director or VP who's relying on a lot of freelancers. And our feeling was you start to lose the continuity of that. And our belief is that every company deserves a CMO or should have one leading strategy, but doesn't necessarily need one full time. And that's the real opportunity that we saw.
That's interesting. So when you come in pitching that, so you're going right to the CEO who says, we need this. I see this layer that's missing. Is it ever a little bit, because I think I've got a lot of thoughts in my head, but I think one of the things when I work with small agencies, I will often counsel them on how to pitch to a company, like a smart business, but maybe they may be unsophisticated when it comes to marketing. So there's a lot of education. There could be some hand holding. There might be some frustration. Things that seem so obvious for the agency may not be so obvious to that director of marketing or that marketing manager that the CEO may have brought on. So you sort of fill that gap, it sounds like. Is that right?
We do. And you're right on the education front too.
Yeah.
This private equity backed middle market is the B2B area that we play in. And they're in
Mm.
automatic growth mode, right? They have 5 to 7 years to grow the company. And there may be opportunities outside of mergers and acquisitions or outside of financial restructuring. So we come in and meet with the CEO, meet with the private equity operators and say, okay, let's look at any due diligence you've done, any research, or else we conduct that. And that's that strategy layer.
Yeah.
And then we put together the plan. I just happen to own, right? We have a creative agency inside of All Coffee. So we can
Yeah.
deliver on the strategy that we develop. So it creates, Jody, like a kind of trust and alignment right from the beginning of the engagement. The difference is that we're not speaking the same language oftentimes as a typical agency owner would with a marketing director or a CMO. That
Yeah.
education piece and sort of slowing down, not using lingo and, sort of marketing terms is really important.
Okay, so that's really interesting. Maybe I want to dive in a little bit there. There are a couple of things, but I'm going to latch on the marketing lingo. That I also find is one of the biggest tendencies that can hamper business development is that agencies just sink right into marketing lingo. I was actually working with an agency in the UK that does a lot of work for industrial marketers, industrial brands, and they have. I thought that was really interesting because they have such a clear niche, and they love it. They're not trying to break out of it, but all their language was very general and jargony and not at all specific to what these industrial marketers do. And it's like, and usually you see that with agencies that don't have a clear positioning. I was like, guys, you've got such a clear positioning. You should totally like revel in it.
Right.
So was that just something you recognize, or did you have to learn the hard way? Like, oh, we got to be a little more human in our language.
I think we learned the hard way because even 7 years into this venture, I'm still seeing it. For example, we were in a meeting the other day and someone said, well, if you're looking at paid, how would a CEO in a niche B2B space, really understand what paid is? And even with all the franchise work we do, paid what, even on that side of the house, right? Because there are so many things that CEOs are paying for, obviously. So I think to really sort of slow down in your discovery calls, figure out what their knowledge level is, figure out who they've worked with in the past, how deep did they go as a business leader with that partner, or maybe they haven't at all, and then really gauge the pitch towards that.
Yeah.
And it's different every time in a lot
Yeah.
of ways.
Yeah. So let me ask you, so how did you, so yeah, let's go back, like rolling back a little bit to how you arrived at this niche. Was it sort of an organic thing or yeah, what?
It's part half and half. One is when you go out on your own or you're starting a new venture, it's really sort of who do you know?
Yeah.
And my business partner, Solomon Wansier, and I had been in the financial services space for some time. So we started with a lot of mortgage marketing. And
Hmm.
then I just pitched everywhere I went. So my first client actually came from the dog park in Coconut Grove in Miami, who happened to be Pharrell's wedding planner.
Oh
so
no.
so,
That is so
I
cool.
just sort of pitched everywhere I went, leveraged contacts. And then I think you start to figure out what are you good at? What's profitable? How can you scale the business development efforts? And franchise became very interesting because it is highly specialized. How do you support a corporate brand all the way through a support system of MarTech stack strategy, all the way through to the individual franchisee and getting people in the door? So once
Yeah.
we had experience with that, we said, okay, now we have this as part of our book. Let's go find more.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I also love the way that you just described that because again, rather than saying, we had some success with franchise and we did some really beautiful work and made a big impact. And it was an omni-channel, response-driven campaign. You described the business issue, the fact that they've got to expand this sort of way of doing business across these these franchisees, right? I always get mixed up, franchise or franchisee. So boom, business issue. So it's tying the marketing imperative to the business issue. So I love how you did that. And also then the way I also describe it is like, then if you can start talking that way, whether it is by talking, whether it's going to the dog park and being able to give I'll use, for want of a better word, your pitch in a natural way, that gets people going, oh, I know someone, or I need that, or that sounds interesting, that's not me. Or whether you're doing it in a more formal way through an introductory email or LinkedIn message, or just even the words that you use on your website. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And Jody, I think you need to be ready all the time. I don't think there's a person
Mm.
at Orange Theory in Southwest Florida who doesn't know what I do. And I just think it's part of the conversation. And that's why
Yeah.
I think that's why the positioning of your agency or your firm, right? The elevator pitch portion of that, and
Yeah.
having a clear understanding of what you do, the business impact, as you mentioned, that you have, and sort of how to move forward with that. And, when I say,
Yeah.
look, I'm a client side marketer who has translated that into a consulting firm. We are, outsourced CMO and fractional marketing teams for companies, and we build custom teams, and we do all the creative as well.
Yeah.
So it's really sort of a build from scratch. It's like Build a Bear for marketing, right? That we build these programs and teams that are strategy driven, and this is who we work with.
Yeah. Yeah. How often do you, as an agency owner, or you and your partner, you or your leadership team, take a look at who your ideal client is and evolve it? Because you mentioned that you saw that there's opportunity in franchise. Was that something that was like so you noticed one day, or just realized 4 months into it, like, hey, we're doing this? Or did you sit down and strategically think this is where we need to go?
I think I'm a humble agency owner who didn't feel comfortable faking it too much until I made it. So for me, it was really striking that balance of proving the concept and our ability to deliver and make an impact. And
Yeah.
once, for example, Stretch Zone starts growing from 50 to 75 to 100, and now they're at 350 when they took all their
Is this one of
marketing
your
in.
clients?
Yes. So we work with
Awesome.
Stretch Zone for almost 4 years, and they went from 50 to 350 with us at 300 locations. You bring the marketing in house. That's sort of the tipping point in franchise where it makes sense to have an in-house team. So it's this emerging earlier stage brand where we said,
Yeah.
someone's got to help them figure out the strategy. Someone's got to build the market tech stack. Someone has to build the franchisee system. So once I felt comfortable that we could do that and repeat it, and that's
Mhm.
the benefit of niche, right? Because you
Yeah.
deliver more value to clients, you go deeper in your expertise. It's easier to get referrals. It's an easier pitch for you because you have a portfolio of work. And
Yeah.
that's the beauty of that I can walk into any franchise environment and I can walk into any sort of B2B environment with exceptions. Right? That we don't work with
Yeah.
SaaS companies, Jody, because I know the level of expertise. They're better off having a CMO lead
Yeah.
us through that. So you
Yeah.
have to look at like what verticals do you not want to play in? Where does your expertise start and end? And
Mhm.
then you find your way. And I think it's okay to choose 2 to 3 and then sort of exploit those, go deep, and then see if you want to add on another one.
So what do you say? So the 2 to 3, in some ways you started to answer my next question,
Great.
which is, what do you say to a colleague who expresses concern that they're limiting themselves too much by, say, just working with franchise owners?
I'd ask how deep I thought how deep have they gone into a
Yeah.
market, and is there a lot more business to get there? I also think it's important for me to balance sort of the consumer franchise brand with industrial and B2B,
Mm.
because I don't want to go too far. I'm really pleased that I have this sort of national consumer brand work for them, but also, I mean, niche marketing. We're doing laser cleaning, we are doing marine construction, but they're 40 to $60 million businesses that really need us.
Mhm.
Conversely, we can make a huge impact there. So I think
Yeah.
it's to balance, how far you've gone to a market, what's the opportunity, and then, how good
Yeah.
that you get in your specialization.
I know some agencies, and I'm not trying to solve this or change this. I think some agencies are concerned that either they, as the agency owner, or their team, especially their creative team, will get bored working with just one or two niches. Is that ever something that comes up for you, or are you more focused about making a business impact?
No, because I wanted to create a really great company for the team to work with.
Hmm.
Our culture is really important to us. It's built on kindness and cooperation and collaboration. I want them to have a good experience. I also want them
Mm.
to focus on sort of less consumer, sort of more niche brands, on the impact that they're having, the
Mm.
discipline that they're learning and going deep in, and to take it as actually my creative director said to me the other day, Amy, if I feel a little frustrated or stymied by something that's so straightforward, straightforward. I look at it as an opportunity to do the very best I can in that category and think of something new and bring something new to them. And I thought that was super profound. And I really appreciated that from her.
Yeah. I'm not a creative professional, so it's not always easy for me to put myself in their shoes. I'm more of a business professional, and so for me, I think that the answer is a little tough love, like, well, do you want to continue to be able to keep those people in a job? At
Yes.
what
Well, that
point does
comes up.
creativity become less important than just being able to be in your job because you're bringing in clients from that one loyal niche. You're doing that repetitive. No, I shouldn't say almost said repetitive work. It's not repetitive work. It's a repeatable process.
You're exactly right. A repeatable strategy, we call it. And it allows us, I encourage them to see how much deeper they can go.
Yeah.
Right. Say we do a HubSpot implementation, a whole foundational branding exercise. We do all their messaging and positioning. Okay, great. We do that. That's foundational work for a lot of our clients. But how much better, how much more innovative, how much deeper can you go? And that's in our hands. We're not
Yeah.
waiting for a CMO to hand us an assignment in our engagement. We are driving strategy. And that
Mhm.
I think is a major difference. So I think you can
Right.
push really hard where you are and get a lot out of that.
It's also interesting is you're driving strategy for companies that really need strategy. I think a lot of agencies would say, well, we want to start with strategy too. And it's not to say that they aren't good at it and it's not important, but if you're pitching, say, a more established consumer products brand, they're talking every agency they talk to is saying that the strategy is important. They know strategy is important. Like they sort of have the mechanisms in place. If you're, a P&G brand, they have the mechanisms in place to make sure that all marketing is comes from a strategy. Your business, you realize that these are the people who are like, you know what? I think we need strategy, or like, oh, we get to that point where like, holy cow, no strategy. What do we do?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest dangers in this business too, or for companies or in-house teams is they just start going and start,
Mm,
doing performance marketing and haven't
interesting.
tied it together with a strategy. Yes, the
Yeah.
P&Gs of the world. My grandfather actually ran channel marketing for Procter and Gamble for many years. And so I think I was like born with this like,
Yeah.
sort of marketing bug in me. But, it's you have to have the strategy in place before you start doing and you get a couple
Mm,
degrees off course and you go too far and too long and you're on the wrong continent.
yeah.
So we are strategy partners to CEOs and we're strategy partners to private equity firm operating partners who say, hey, we acquired this company and did this due diligence and we think there's a sales and marketing strategy, but you have to be sophisticated and smart enough to dive into this business. You cannot scratch the surface when you're dealing with like wastewater conveyance or we do some consumer work with them, but you have to go really deep
Right.
on a fractional basis. So in my firm, you're doing that with 6 companies at a time,
Yeah. So
right?
I want to go back to what you said about
Mhm.
private equity because they are in some way they're both uh well, I guess they're probably more really an intermediary. Like that the private equity partners are strategic partners that will introduce you to startups who need you. Um, was that also something that you made like a concerted decision, we need to go after these businesses, or did it happen organically? Tell me a little bit more about how you
4
manage that.
years 4 years ago, I didn't know that I enjoyed business building, Jody. Like when
Mhm.
you and I knew each other, we're working in in-house marketing and sales for this .com and you're right, it was chaotic and crazy and amazing and we were all learning so much. I thought I was a corporate person. I thought I was a CMO. I thought that's where I operated well.
Mm,
And then I learned, oh my gosh, it's not just for my survival, but I actually really enjoy building and figuring out the formula and all of that. So, what kind of people do I want to surround myself with? What kind of markets do I want to play in? Where can I have an impact? And I said, wait a
yeah.
second, if a private equity firm needs a level of sophistication and they really could benefit from a CMO in each of the portfolio companies in this middle market, and they bring you scale, right? So we have one firm, 19 active investments in the portfolio, and we work with 12.
Wow.
And so that kind of scalability, and then how do you find that in other markets, right? Franchise, same thing, very insular tribal market. So I focused on where we're good and where I think we can find more.
How much business development time, this isn't a question you can answer, are you focused on building the relationships with those private equity folks versus direct to brand?
I would say half and half.
Okay.
It really depends, right? So, what's my capacity? What's my utilization of that capacity inside of the agency? And am I in operational mode or pure biz dev mode?
Mm,
If I have any capacity at all, I'm in super biz dev mode. As soon as that starts to fill, I'll get a little bit more operational and then decide, what does the balance of our client roster look like right now? Could we use more franchise? Like who's available on the team? What areas of expertise? So it's this constant puzzle that I'm
yeah.
trying to put together. But I think that's a really exciting part of it. It's not just selling widgets, it's trying to
Yeah.
make all the pieces work together.
You're also looking at, I love this because you're looking at like leading indicators. And again, I would hope that a lot of agency owners, as business owners, are doing this as a matter of course. But I'd love the way that it sounds like it's almost automatic that you sit down and say, where's our business going and what kind of decisions do we have to make here?
Well, I think working on the business and not in the business is one of the biggest challenges that we have. When
Yeah.
I started this, I was incredibly naive, Jody, shouldn't surprise you. I just, I loved marketing and I thought I could do it. And I had a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old and wanted to spend more time with them. And I'm glad I didn't know how many fail. I'm glad I wish I
Yeah.
had known why, that cash
Mhm.
flow and figuring out the formula and the economic model is paramount. I
Yeah.
didn't realize how much I would be selling. I am still, as you and I talked about, still very tied to it as a 20-person firm, but I also like it because
Mhm.
while I'm pitching and talking about the team and what we do, it's helping me refine the model. Right.
Yeah.
Like I'm learning more about what the needs are out in the market. It keeps me externally focused.
Yeah.
If I were
Yeah.
just focused on delivering and strategy and work product, I think that I would sort of miss the forest through the trees a little bit. So that's
Yeah.
why I like founder led sales at this stage. When we're 35 people, probably won't function as well.
So before we came on live, you and I were talking, and I said I'm going to like quiz you a little bit on founder-led sales. I feel like it's something that for whatever reason, I've been seeing a lot. I don't know, articles, posts, and a lot of it is like, hey, how to decouple sales from the founder, how to move away from founder-led sales. And I guess for me, with the agencies that I work with, which are between I say 5 to 55 people, but really probably closer to 10 to 25. And
Mhm.
at a certain until you get to a certain size, I just feel like the founder, owner, key partner, CEO has got to be they're the best business development resource that agency has.
Yes.
Not the only one, but the best one. So let's figure out how to make it work for you. So I personally or professionally to grapple with this. How do I advise my clients when to move from founder-led sales? And I've got a few ideas, but I'd love to again hear your thoughts on
Sure.
what would work for you.
Sure. It's a progression.
Mhm.
We are on the cusp of bringing someone in to help open doors based
Okay.
on the targets and the niches that we've developed.
Yeah.
To maybe have an initial discovery call, maybe sort of do a service market fit for what the needs are, and then pitch. Usually it's 2 calls for me. I'll do a needs assessment, sort of meet with CEOs, senior team, understand what they're looking for, and then I put together strategy that I pitch. So I go in and sort of diagnose what's happening, put together what I think is a very sort of loose sort of direction and scope, validate that,
Mhm. Yeah.
and then scope build, right? And negotiate. But you can
Uh,
have help with opening doors and building scope. You don't
mhm.
have to, as a founder, do all of that. And I have traditionally, and I'm trying to move away from that and to have
Yeah.
support there.
And so are you delegating it sounds like I don't wanna put words in your mouth, but I'll probably do that anyway. It sounds like you're not yet delegating the conversations with the
No.
client, but maybe you're delegating some of the sort of the schedule management, some of the follow-up even. Tell me a little bit more about, like, how you're deciding what to delegate from this really important
Yeah.
dance with a prospect.
So I have a list of private equity firms and franchise brands that are
Mhm.
sort of in my purview. So I may reach out to them. I have been reaching out to them, but I may delegate that piece to it too, intro, have me copied on the email on that initial call. But I really think at this point,
Yeah.
maybe it's a year of shadowing.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a year of being with me sort of in those situations. And then I think more and more I can start to hand that off. But
Yeah.
it's the pitch, it's the company, it's the strategy. We don't just go in and say, here's our menu of digital, here's our sort of creative services approach. It's
Yeah.
tell me about the challenges you have in the business. Show me your due diligence for when you were partnered with this private equity firm. Let me look at that and then put together a framework for an engagement and what resources I think you'll need. That's the challenging part that requires a lot of skill. That's going to take me, I think, a year to hand off pieces of that.
Like skill and experience, just having
Yeah.
done it. I love that you talked about a year of shadowing. I also, and I have limited real data on this, but I also think that most agency owners overlook the power of mentoring someone promising, and sometimes it's not necessarily the most likely candidate to be to do this. It sounds like you are specifically hiring someone who knows how to open doors, which is great. But this idea, but even then, you're probably going to want them to shadow you. Our mutual boss, Robert Levitan, another shout out to Robert.
Yeah.
I feel like I was so lucky with someone like him and a few other fantastic mentors who were just so willing to just take us along and
Yes.
listen to the conversations and test our own abilities and put us in front of the client while they're sort of sitting in the seat next to us. And gosh, agency owners out there, if you're wondering how to start to delegate some of those federal, I think that's one of the most important things. And it doesn't happen overnight, but just let the promising, more junior people just be with you in these conversations you're having with a client. Let them hear the cues that you're listening to and responding to.
Absolutely. It's so much of this whole business is listening.
Yeah.
Listening to your team, listening to prospects, listening to clients. And, we run a remote firm. So I do not have physical office space. I am rarely physically in front of clients, but I'm watching body language the best I can on Teams and Zoom.
Mhm.
Right. And then the other thing that I think is really important, Jody, is, do you scale an agency through hiring senior people? Where does that come from? Of course, we all
Mm.
have to be nimble with respect to where the business is coming from, what the
Yeah.
needs are of clients, but we have individual development plans or IDPs for everyone inside the company. So we have a set of competencies by position.
Yeah.
Then we have them rate themselves on their competencies. And then anywhere that's a 7 or below, that's what we develop in them. And I consider it a career lattice, not a ladder, because you may be in marketing consulting, but want to go over to social and design
Mm.
and development. So I think that also while you're focused on scaling a new business development, you also need to be focused on how you're developing your team, your cost structure for your labor, and how you get
Mm.
them to meet the needs of the business on the business development front. That's part of the puzzle as well.
Yeah. Yeah. The much bigger puzzle.
Mhm.
Um, I've got a lot of questions. I warned you this would happen. It's almost at the bottom of the hour. I'm like, oh, I still have so many to talk about. But maybe just to end so that we don't run over too much on maybe a little bit about strengths. I'm going to try to articulate this into one question, gather all the thoughts in my head. And in some ways, I want to maybe jump off of what you were saying about the assessments that you and your team do on all their ODPs, and um, so you reinforce where they're weak. But do you ever look at someone and say, and this, 'cause this is what I do with my clients. I had an epiphany a few years ago where I realized, like, you know what? I'm never going to get someone to do what you do, like go and walk into a dog park and be like, "Hey, here's what I do." There are some people, they just don't want to do that. They would much rather do something else. They'd much rather maybe make a keynote speech, or they would rather write a book, or even have a conversation based out of a meeting set up by someone else completely. And so what I often try to say is like, "Okay, you know what? I'm not going to make you do what you really don't like doing. But let's find a backdoor into this business development thing. Let's find something that you are good at and build a program around that." And that's really important when you're still very focused on when you're reliant on founder-led sales. But yeah, so with your people, especially when it comes to business development, do you ever look at someone and you're like, "Yeah, you know what? I think you're just never going to be comfortable in a networking situation, so we're not going to make you do that. We'll have you do something else."
Yes, absolutely. And if you're a founder who's uncomfortable with business development and networking, and listen, I go to the International Franchise Association show every year with
Yeah.
thousands of people by myself.
Yeah.
It's way outside of my comfort zone as sort of
Really?
when it's that big,
Yeah. Okay.
yes, but also I try to flip the script on that. And when I walk into a room of no one I know, I think, fresh people to talk to. And I really try to flip the script on that. But I think you need to play into your strengths. And if
Yeah.
going and hunting is not that, then is there a lead gen program? Are there passive sort of leads that can be handed to you? And then you jump into a meeting and you feel great doing that, as
Right.
opposed to me having a target list of 10 private equity managing partners that I want to be on their radar and call, and I'll do that.
Hmm.
But what I needed behind me was the experience and the portfolio and the knowledge and the expertise in that area to back it up. And that's why
Right.
specialization is really good for me, because I feel incredibly confident making the call.
If you can make a promise, but if you can't prove it, then that promise is empty, and you're not gonna sustain the conversation with a prospect for very long.
Right. I had
Yeah.
a managing partner at a private equity firm tell me the other day. He said, "You're with one of the few like called vendor partners we work with, who's
Yeah.
not just interested in your next invoice." And I
Interesting.
was really surprised today. I said, "Really, people work like that?" Because we really have to believe we're going to make a difference and watch that
Yeah.
impact.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's so interesting about your strategy as well is that I feel like I have been involved with agencies who say, "Oh, well, maybe we should pitch private equity firms," and then don't do it well or don't do it as consistently as they should. They don't really follow through, and they say, "Ah, yeah, we tried that." So I think you're probably the only agency that I know. Maybe, I'm sure you're not the only one out there, but the only agency that I've ever come in contact with that actually has been successful, and at both in terms of volume of business, and I'm going to assume profitability in getting business through private equity firms. Because
Well, it's
both,
interesting. And I think it's the strategy component, because you have to be able to talk like a CEO and talk like
yeah,
a private equity person and adopt their lexicon and their vocabulary and read and read and read about the
yeah,
formula and how they approach it. I think if we come in from just sort of a pure creative or growth marketing strategy point, that it won't go over as well. It's really
yeah,
understanding how they work that and trying to relate to it. We
yeah,
actually just did a lunch and learn recently at one, saying, "Okay, here's a middle market B2B firm. This is what we do. Like, let me put out in 50 slides in an hour and a half my entire thinking with how
yeah,
this happens." And it's a culmination of 30 years of doing a lot of this. I used to worry that I would age out of the business. I don't worry about that anymore. You know,
yeah,
I'm not doing TikTok
yeah,
strategy as much as
yeah,
I'm doing, B2B strategy.
yeah.
So that's works fine with me
Yeah,
there.
I
But
do.
yes, yeah, exactly.
This has been such a pleasure, and I'm so glad that you were here. We didn't have a whole lot of comments, people, but I think this is going to be super valuable. We're going to promote this because I think there's so many things that we talked about here that you talked about that are going to be very valuable to to small agency owners. Anything before we wrap up? Anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to share that I should have asked you?
Ah, um, just really to be patient with
That's hard
where
advice to hear.
yeah, just to be patient with trying to figure it out, but to schedule regular cadences, whether you're using EOS like we use to run the
Mhm.
agency, but what is your operational cadence to address business development,
Yeah,
scalability, what the formula looks like? What is your financial reporting cadence? What is your sort of solving issues inside the agency cadence? What is your touch point on business development? And really be intentional about the time you set aside and the process that you use to work on the business.
yeah, and I think a lot of it is setting aside time. People don't like to hear that either. "I have no time." I think "I have no time for business development" is a false statement.
Yeah.
That
Yes. And I think it's creating a culture of business development, which I didn't
Yeah,
realize. We had so many referrals for so long, but that's not a strategy. That's just hope.
yeah. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate it. So, let me ask you, and again, I think we probably did this before we came on, but how do people reach you? And hopefully Megan can like type this up in the comments so that we know it. Maybe we probably have your email somewhere, but yes, how do people reach you and talk to you if they would like to ask you a little bit more about how you run biz dev at your agency at Wild Coffee
Sure.
Marketing?
I love giving that advice and meeting with fellow agency owners. So the best place is wildcoffeemarketing.com. And we allow people to schedule a consultation that way. I'd be happy. It goes right onto my calendar and my team manages it. And I would love to spend 30 minutes and sort of talk through those challenges and give some advice.
That's really generous of you. Thank you.
Absolutely.